So today I'm revisiting two games that I first talked about a few years ago, which are the Attack on Titan games from Koei Tecmo. I don't know why, I've been in the mood to play these games, and I think I will revisit the campaign for both these games soon. But today I want to bring up a specific topic. So in the past, I said that Attack on Titan 2 was better than Wings of Freedom, and I quickly realized that the vast majority of people disagree with me, which is honestly completely fine. It means that we have different perspectives, and there are actually some elements of the first game that I do prefer over the second, like the variety of the mission design. However, there's one piece of criticism that I never truly understood, and that was the idea that Attack on Titan 2 was sluggish. I'd heard this in the past even before I published my video, and I even made sure to revisit both games to check and see if this was true or not, and in my experience I've always reached the conclusion that the second game was faster. I always held the opposite opinion, which is that the first game, when you're exhausted of resources, can feel very sluggish. So since I installed both these games on my PS5, I decided to reconfirm if this was true or not. So I played around, explored the areas, and looked back at the speed and efficiency of the gear, and after some testing, I did notice one thing, and that is the fact that boost actually worked better in Wings of Freedom because it doesn't require an extra jump to pull it off. And I did notice that this was giving me some edge while navigating through the areas compared to the second game. But here's the thing, even if boost requires less inputs, this does still come at a cost, which is the amount of gas that you have available, and this is where I start to favor the second title over the first, because I think that in general the UI of the resource management is overall better. It's customizable, as in you can pick which of the D keys will be used to refill whichever item you want, and after playing the game for long enough, it just becomes muscle memory. You click one button and bam, your resource is refilled. Meanwhile, in Wings of Freedom, you have to scroll left or right in order to pick the item that you need, which does make management less intuitive. Hell, even just simply knowing how many items you have available requires extra inputs just to verify, while in the second game, it's shown at plain sight. Because of this, I end up holding myself back from boosting too much because all I'm doing is accelerating the inevitable outcome where I need to refill my gas. Otherwise, swinging is gonna become really fucking difficult, which is another thing I also want to point out. Swinging in the second game is actually faster. I've had my time playing these two games back to back, rewatching the recorded footage, and even picking the same characters, and every time I do, I always reach the conclusion that the second game swings faster. If you have a different experience, please tell me why. I want to know when exactly you're experiencing the sluggishness, aside from boosting requiring extra input, which in all honesty, after trying out for myself, I actually prefer when you have to input X one more time, because sometimes I don't want to immediately boost and waste resources. I just want to do a simple double jump, which can sometimes be convenient for changing directions more instantly. Plus, there's also the fact that even if you wanted to use your supply of gas more conservatively, you could probably still navigate just fine as long as you know your way at walking on top of walls when you're in building infested areas, something that you can't do in the first game. I've also seen some complaints regarding the control schemes, mainly the fact that you have to hook and slash the titans using the same button, but the thing is, I feel like this is somewhat of a misunderstood decision. You know why you can no longer hook using the square button? Because every time you lock to a certain titan, you can no longer freely navigate, because every time you try to swing, it'll instead hook into one of the body parts of the titans. Now, what if you get into a position where you're badly positioned? Maybe you're in a tight spot and the angle isn't quite right. Well, in the second game, you can just readjust yourself by swinging around normally, and I've had this happen a few times, especially when I knock one of the titans' legs and they start falling while knocking down buildings, or just simply changing angles while they're falling apart. Can you imagine how annoying it would be if the only way for you to readjust yourself is to either literally walk and change position, which is dangerous for a few reasons, or having to hook to one of the body parts, which might end up accidentally unhooking when the titan is falling into pieces? Well, this was a risk you were always taking when you played Wings of Freedom. I mean, personally, I've never been negatively affected by the change in the control schemes. The fundamentals of hooking and slashing remain generally the same. At worst, I just had to relearn the control schemes, but other than that, it really wasn't a big deal. But you know, I thought about this even deeper because I truly was having a hard time understanding how so many people didn't notice that the swinging is faster in the second game. So I thought about this a little bit more, and I think I might know why some people believe it's sluggish. So for one, and I don't know how much people are aware of this, but this game has an option to disable slow motion, which the first game, at least as far as I know, doesn't have this option. The reason why I disabled it personally was because I wanted to accelerate the progress of the missions, because grinding is a pretty big problem in this game. And funnily enough, when I was recording footage for this video, I actually ended up re-enabling slow motion because having it disabled made the game so fast, and I just got done playing Wings of Freedom that I almost felt a little bit of motion sickness. But that was at the beginning, because eventually I disabled it again because it's just way better to play like this. That's the first point of view. The other one is that depending on where you play this, it's likely you were playing it at 30 FPS. You see, Rings of Freedom plays at 60 frames per second on the PlayStation 4, which is kind of to be expected since it's a cross-gen game, and there's very little reason for why a game made for inferior hardware wouldn't be able to run at a higher frame rate. However, Attack on Titan 2 on the original PlayStation 4 ran at 30. On the PlayStation 4 Pro, I think it varies from 30 to 60, I'm not entirely sure because I don't have the hardware with me. I do, on the other hand, have a PlayStation 5, and this game is continuously running at 60. This is by far the best experience that I've had with the game, and if the frame rate was having any impact on the fluidity of the game for a lot of people, then that might make sense, because I've never really been someone that has been heavily impacted by frame rates, maybe because I have to deal with 30 frames per second every time I have to revisit older games, and also the fact that this has kind of been the standard for quite a few titles even on the PlayStation 4, which I've spent a decent amount of my gaming time on. I guess I've just never really been fazed by it, at least until now, because I honestly can't envision myself playing this game on my bare metal PlayStation 4 anymore, because it's so much better on a PS5. The only thing that is missing is a higher resolution, which this game doesn't have. It's 1080p all throughout, but it's still a solid ass experience. The other thing is, this argument obviously doesn't apply to PC users, so if you're having a different experience, I would appreciate if you could give your own feedback. Regardless of what the reason may be, if you have a PlayStation 4 copy of the game and you happen to own a PS5, I would encourage you to play the second game. You never know, it might be better than you remember. Anyway, I think that's all I have to share. Stay safe.